Welcome back. This is your host, Johnny Richardson with Platinum Real Estate Professionals. And this is the kickoff to your real estate game in 2019. Once again, I brought in a special guest, Mr. Ray Herrera Jr. with Residential Bancorp. He is the branch manager. We came in to educate you a little bit more what you would need to get prepared to get qualified for a mortgage. Last week, we started out with credit. This is the next step. And I'm just gonna roll right into it, Ray. I got a basic question for you. If somebody wants to get approved for a mortgage, what is the minimum score they could have and get that approval with you?
Well, you can have as low as a 500 FICO score, but that does require 10% down, Johnny. But traditionally, we go with FHA loans, 3.5% down if you have at least a 580 FICO score. If the property doesn't qualify for FHA, we have to take you up to a conventional loan for 600. You need a 620 FICO score for conventional.
Man, that's pretty impressive. So I don't even need a 600 score, and I could be walking into my first house. Is that what you're telling me?
That is correct, and you would need 3.5%. Plus closing costs. So in many cases, a seller can pay your closing costs. We'll get into that later.
Oh man, that's pretty impressive. You know, that brings me up. There's a couple questions that actually came in this week. And there's one gentleman, Jim from Reno, had asked, what are closing costs?
There's two types of closing costs, Johnny. There's reoccurring closing costs and non-reoccurring closing costs. Reoccurring closing costs continue to happen. Those, in my opinion, are not closing costs. A home needs to be insured. You're gonna pay interest on a property. When you have a home loan, you're gonna pay property taxes. So those costs that are reoccurring, we're gonna collect them during the escrow. It's kind of like a piggy bank. That's the easiest way to see it. You're kind of putting some money in. We set up an escrow account for you. So every month you're putting money in the bank for your property taxes that are due every 6 months and your homeowner's insurance that needs to be renewed every single year. So those are the reoccurring closing costs. The non-reoccurring closing costs are broker fees, points, discount points, home warranties. Those are the non-reoccurring closing costs. If the broker has a fee with that real estate agent, if the lender charges points, once again, those are the non-reoccurring closing costs. Combined, those costs should range anywhere from $4,500 to about $7,000 depending on the size of the transaction. That's probably for a range of $150 to $250, $300. You should be in the $4,500 to $7,000 range.
Now, and you had mentioned it's possible if you're buying your first house or second house, there's a possibility the seller could pay for some of that.
Absolutely. So it's a very generic answer to give in the pre-approval process, but yeah, absolutely. A seller is allowed to pay up to 6% with FHA and up to 3% with conventional. I've seen cases where a seller is willing to pay, for example, $7,500 for closing costs on a $200,000 property, but it's non-compliant to give them that $7,500. The max that they can receive on a $200,000 conventional loan would be $6,000. So those are things that are really taken into account. Everything is negotiable in a real estate transaction from the beginning to the end. I've seen sellers reducing their closing costs because the value came in lower, and we have to figure out what we have to do as a team to make that work, make that transaction work. So I could never guarantee closing costs or out-of-pocket expenses until we have a contract, and then we can get pretty close. And even up until then, we could be off by a few $100s.
There you go. But yeah, at least you have an idea till the process gets started.
Yeah.
That is awesome. That is.
So in general, Johnny, just to answer your question, it could be from $4,000 to $7,000. That's a normal range.
That's nice, definitely.
Yeah.
For somebody that's just really trying to prepare and put some money aside that they could have that kind of help.
Exactly.
Sounds pretty easy to get into a place.
Exactly.
And let's go on to our next question. We had Darren from California send a message in this week. He said not just getting prepared for his first house, what he's mostly interested in is setting himself up strategically for that second home and investing into a property as well. What would be his first and second step?
First of all, Darren's a stud for thinking like that. I commend anybody, that's the one thing that I encourage with all my partners, family, friends, you got, especially if you're in this industry, you need to own real estate. There's never a bad market to purchase a home with 5% down. So for anybody that currently owns a home and they're interested in investing, you have to understand that you are capable of buying a home with as little as 5% down. The catch though is there has to be a justified reason to why you're buying that second home as an owner occupied. In some cases, you can be a 55-year-old couple, for example, one of the cases I had this year where they wanted to downsize. So that is possible. They wanted to get into a smaller home because they were able to prove that their twins were able to go back to college. I'm sorry, not able to go back, but they were going to college, so they wanted to downsize. It's a lot more difficult to downsize with 5% down. Ironically, it's easier to upsize, to buy an improved property. So let's say you live in one of the lofts in downtown, like my cousin that I've been encouraging to buy. He just recently got a raise. His wife just took on a job and she's making double the income that she was 3 years ago when he bought his first property. So what I tell him is, why don't you go buy yourself a $400,000 property? You will now cash flow on your downtown property and you can own 2 homes paying less than you're paying right now, but you have to come up with a 5%. So you can buy a home with 5% down if you currently own a home. And we have to look at and determine whether we can justify a downsize or an improvement is the most easy and most feasible. And the biggest thing is just coming up with a 5% down. You can still receive a gift from a family member. There's just ways around it. So that's investing 101. Buy your first property. A year later, you can buy a second property with 5% down. Whether you use a down payment assistance program and walked in with 0 on your first property. I've seen cases, Johnny, where people walked in with almost nothing out of their pocket. A year later, they managed to save up 5%. Now they buy a better property because they're in a better financial situation. Now they own 2 properties and they're actually paying less than they're paying today.
That's
on one property.
That is wild.
So I had one of those cases last week from a referral from one of your friends, Gabriel. He referred someone to me, and after I did a financial analysis, he was paying less money out of pocket by refinancing his current property, paying out all his debt. Yes, his loan did recast, but now he's in a better financial position with everything that's happening in Vegas. It's just the time to buy. We're in a golden era in Las Vegas, in my opinion.
One more last question, Ray, before we wrap this up. We had Karen from Las Vegas. She said her plan was to rent for the next year, save some money, and then get a mortgage next year. How would you advise somebody in that current situation?
Karen, if you see this video, just give us a call, Karen. Anyone who is saying that they're gonna rent and save up money, talk to a realtor every single month. Talk to a mortgage professional every month. Even if you're stuck in a lease, talk to us. There is the possibility that we can help you break your lease and help you get out of that. If you are really considering renting, just always take the free advice that Johnny or myself are willing to give you. I've seen people walking into homes with nothing out of pocket. There are scenarios where the seller pays all the closing costs and the grants that are available are actually covering your down payment. So it is very possible to still walk into a home with nothing out of pocket, Johnny. So if you don't have any money, give us a call. The consultation is free and we're here available for you 7 days a week.
That's amazing. I tell you what, based off of just these questions that you answered alone, it really is not that difficult to get qualified for a mortgage or at least start those steps. So I really appreciate you, Ray, taking the time, stopping down, educating our viewers and answering some questions. So you heard it right here, Mr. Ray Herrera, Captain Save Alone, Residential Bank Corp. All right, this is the kickoff to your real estate game in 2019. Johnny Richardson signing off. Can't wait to see you next week.